And is the end of
We
three.
are live.
Okay, we don't have
Andrea?
an official
Yes, sir.
still live.
Excuse me, I'll be quiet. But anyway, Andrea, since we haven't really started yet, that was great timing to order that all-day rain the day after the trees were planted.
Yeah, that was a nice rain, wasn't it? We got.
Nice, slow, gentle rain.
I know that was a good one.
I rode by those trees early today and they said, wow, we feel good.
They looked happy, huh?
They look really happy.
Oh, that's good.
Too, they look fine. Well, we can start it, but we don't have an official meeting because we don't have a quorum. I was expecting Connie to show up here. He's not here yet. But everybody, I got your note and printed it out. You have a lot of good ideas. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I sort of sit, down by a, there's Connie. Yay!
Go ahead.
We're official.
How many people do you need for a quorum, Lee?
We have it now. Herb and I and Connie make up a quorum.
Okay.
We're starting, and I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at Herb sent out today a list of ideas to discuss relative to this proposal to subsidize the cost of fees for residents.
Yes, and I can add to that too when Herb's finished.
Okay, Herb, why don't you start?
There's in a way with Arborfest, we've been given residents trees, and it's been their responsibility to maintain them and to plant them and all that. But I think that kind of trees, in my mind, this might be are basically the kind of trees that got planted at Cali Park. Trees of that magnitude, 1.5 or 2 inch, that have a decent root ball. I don't know. I was trying to guesstimate what that root ball was as far as weight. Probably, and I think, around
Probably 1,000 pounds, 800, 1,000 pounds, something like that, probably.
Well, these weren't that big a root, but.
Well, normally, and are you talking about the ones at Cali Park?
Yeah.
I mean, it varies with the species, and each one is a slightly different poundage according to the amount of soil that's actually dug with them. But they run, I would say they run at least 800, probably.
Okay.
You would think. Now, I'm not saying every one of those did, but I mean, average, if you had a 2-inch tree, probably in that range, 800 or a little more.
Bigger than the ones we go give away at Arborfest.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's a different world. I mean.
Inch at max.
Well, I really think we need impact. The trees need to be like the ones that went in Cali Park.
I think so too. I agree with that.
So we're in I'll just average $150 a tree kind of costs,
Plus planning, depending on how you want to go with it. But yes, I would say 250, 260, something like that.
You're talking about planning also?
Well, if you included planning, I mean, I've had clients over the years that have totally supplied, bought the trees and totally supplied everything, the tree and the planting. And I've had clients that have done cost sharing with the residents where the city or the HOA would split the cost you know, where maybe the city would purchase the trees wholesale and then the resident would pay for the planting costs. So there's different ways to do it. I was reading about Seneca Gardens. I don't know if you all know Mike Heyman. Have you ever heard that name? He used to,
Yeah.
he's a big arborist in town. He used to work for the Courier Journal years ago as a photographer, many years ago, but he's gotten into trees and grown trees. He's done a lot of work with trees in the city in different areas. And I don't know if he still does, but he used to live in Seneca Gardens. And he was responsible for getting their city to be a tree city, USA, and to plant trees, more trees, kind of like you're wanting to do in Prospect. And they share the cost. They'll give, depending on their budget yearly, they give the residents up to $150 per household to plant a tree in a pre-approved area in their front yard. So, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but the cost sharing, different, you know, it's worked pretty well. But it just depends, you know, you might want to jumpstart your program, see if the council would appropriate X number of dollars where you could say, well, we're going to plant, you know, we're going to have the monies available to plant X number of trees the first year and just supply the trees and plant them, just to maybe get some interest. I don't know.
Here's my 2 cents. I think we need to have the homeowners pay something for this. I mean, that way they're vested, they have a vested interest in the livability of the tree.
Right. I really agree with that myself. I think Herb might feel differently. Do you, Herb?
I really do. I think let's take the commercial properties. They're back up. Their backyard faces 42, and they don't really give a rat's what the appearance is on 42. Okay, well, it's our city, and it's, you know, in our city, you know, we pay pretty good taxes. And the city has been wise and smart to be able to have reserves. And so you know, and many times I think people start to think of Prospect not having the resources, but we really do. And so I think if we really want this to happen, I mean, you can have plans that sit on shelves, you have plans to get implemented. And I'm basically saying, let's try the first year to like 10 trees, which we'll say that's $3,000. And let's see what people's interests are. In what now people have to do is I don't know, Connie, if you had a chance to look at the watering. I sent out a pretty late email, but it's a plan that the residents have to sign an agreement that they will do this. So we're not adding any that deal of $17 a trip to water trees that they could go on and on and on, you know. And the thing about it, the people don't water it. I think we have to write in our agreement where it would be a cost. There would be a fine that they'd have to pay, you know.
Oh, I don't think that's going to work. I
don't think there should be.
We won't find them. I think the way to.
Herb, you said. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, they just have to have some kind of money in the game, you know, just anything, $100, something.
Well,
you said 10 trees, Herb, in your scenario. To give you an idea, one of my clients, the city of Hurstburn, started a program about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5 now. In the first go round, they got 50 residents that wanted to plant trees. So, I mean, there was a considerable backlog of interest just because, you know, a lot of the same situation. And as you have in Prospect, there were a lot of residents that had taken out trees and, you know, there was just a need. They jumped at it.
Well, what did Hurstburn, was that a sharing pay for the?
Hurstburn Now, Hurstbourne hasn't done it every year. They've done it maybe every other year. They've done 2. So maybe it's been going on 4 years. So they planted 50. They totally paid for the trees. So we bought them wholesale, just like you all did from Abrams. And they paid to have their a contractor plant them and mulch them. Now, they had, there's, with all these ones that I've been associated with, they do have different cities have come up with different parameters that residents have to agree to with their planning programs. Like in Hurstbourne, for instance, the residents could put out a flag where they wanted the tree within so many feet of the edge of the street. But then the city called to have the bud markings done. And if there were any changes necessary because of the position of the flag with relationship to the utilities, then I would go out and adjust it. The city of Anchorage, I don't know if you're interested in all this, but
Yeah.
stop me if you're not. But the city of Anchorage actually makes each resident, now they do a cost sharing program, and they send out an order form. That people have to fill out how many trees they want, and they have an agreement so that they have to initial that they'll agree to follow if they get one of these trees. And first of all, they agree to waive any and all liability of the forestry board there for the planting, care, and future maintenance.
Yeah.
The forestry board in that case gets the utilities located. The forestry board in that case has, Hurstbourne doesn't have a forestry board. So in the case of Anchorage, since they have an active forestry board like you all, they will go out and actually check after the utility. The people put their flags in within 15 to 20 feet of the edge of the road, because that's mostly where the right-of-ways lie. Generally, every street's different though, but they put the flag, they get the utilities marked. If there's changes that need to be made to the position of the flag, the forestry board will go out and move the flags and check with the residents. So they have a whole set of parameters, but but one of them is that the care and maintenance will be the responsibility of the resident.
Well, I agree that it would be really nice to plant some trees along 42 where those businesses back up to 42. We see the backs of the businesses. It's not a very pretty way to come into Prospect.
Maybe you all should consider, what you want to do in terms of, maybe you should start on a, kind of keep it simple the first year or two, and maybe offer it to the residents first, or whatever you want to do, but offer one or the other first. In this case, probably the residents maybe, and then get the bugs worked out of it. And because there's going to be little hitches here and there and things that you'll learn and maybe want to change the following year. And then as it gets really off and running, then start, trying to get the commercial businesses online with.
I would agree with that. I want to get a couple 2 cents in. First of all, I agree with the cost sharing in order to get the residents committed to the program. Secondly, on the commercial issues, we've had zero success in giving away trees to commercial entities here, and furthermore, they have to deal in some cases with digging up asphalt or cement to plant the tree and care for it. I don't think there'd be much interest in that, but certainly it's a good objective. Another thought that occurred to me was the planters, Perez or whatever, they're going to have to deal with individual residents, and maybe they're going to need some more money per tree, or they're going to need somebody to go along and kind of shepherd them through the process with the residents. another
Well-
thing to think about.
Right. What has been worked out, keep going back to Anchorage, but a couple of my other clients is where they have forestry boards is the forestry board will, once the orders have been placed and you know what each resident is going to get and how many trees and so forth, then they come up with like an Excel spreadsheet that just lists, you know, all the names of the residents, what trees they're getting, the addresses, etc. And after really whoever you get to plant kind of learns the layout of what you're doing and so forth, it goes pretty smoothly. And then if there are questions regarding the planting, they call the resident would, I mean, the planner works for the city, basically. So the planner is, and the forestry board, but the planner is under, they're being directed by either a forestry board member or by the city as far as questions that come up, or if, you know, there's some issue with getting a tree planted where, you know, it was supposed to go or something like that. So it usually ends up working pretty, you know, I'm sure there'd be bugs the first year or so, Lee, but after you get going with it, it usually works out. It goes pretty smoothly for the most part. I mean, you always run into issues. So somebody has their front gate closed, or they can't get into a fence, you know, a fenced yard or something, or whatever. But we've had really good, the ones I've been associated with, we've had really good success with the establishment of the trees, you know, that they get planted well and off to a good start. And we've had really good success with them doing well over time.
The Andrea, when you're using the word planter, that's, you mean the person actually installs the tree?
Right.
Okay. Now, doesn't listening to Anchorage, doesn't the resident contract with the planter?
No. The forestry board sets it up directly. The city sets it up with the planner. The city would take, or the forestry board actually handles getting bids on planting. A successful bidder is chosen, and then that company or contractor or planner, whatever you want to call them, plants all the trees. So there's consistency and uniformity, and we know they're planting them correctly.
Well, that's yeah. Does the city then, Anchorage, then send a bill to that resident for the planting cost?
Yes, they will. Well, I think what they do initially is that the forestry board there has an order form, and sometime in the late summer we come up with a list. Now like the city of Hurstburn only offered 2 choices. I think in the beginning you should keep it as simple as possible just to work out the bugs, honestly. But Anchorage has gotten to the point where they may offer maybe 5 or 6 trees. And so, and those trees are chosen have particular parameters that we know they'll do well on the edges of streets. They'll canopy over the street. They're lower maintenance, you know, that kind of thing. And so the residents are sent an order form, and they have a choice of, let's say, a handful of trees. So they put on that, and they have the costs for each tree. Half what the cost is, they're part of it. They're part of it to plant. And so they then order the trees that way, and they will send in a check to the city prior to planting.
Okay.
I assume it's prior to planting. I don't handle that part of it.
Yeah.
Lee, is this going to take the place of Arborfest? Is this the end of Arborfest?
It
Well,
wouldn't
it's a
have
good
to
question. I have this. How does it relate to Arborfest? Some residents may just prefer to come over and get a free tree and plant it themselves, which is fine.
I think you could do both.
The plan is to encourage more tree planting, which I think is a good idea. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
We could do those. Actually, all depends on budget
Right.
and how it affects our planning on city property. Also, it depends actually how much money we have available for trees in general. But I want to diverge it a little bit. I thought Herb had a good idea on one factor there. and that is, while Anchorage or some other cities might require planting in the front yard, I don't see why necessarily that should be a requirement. People may want to put their trees in the backyard, and if our idea is to encourage canopy, that accomplishes that.
Now we got to stay in right of way. We got to stay in public property.
Yeah, I don't think you can plant on
We
private
can't go
property.
in yards.
Well, the right of way is not public property. It's public jurisdiction, but it's not public property.
Well, Lee, I saw the letter from Chris Gorman, and it you know, I know my boundaries because I have a survey and I know what is not my property. So where I planted Desocova was city property. It's right away. And it may not city property, it's public property. So let's
Well, I'm
go.
going to ask you to this up again for Chris Grumman when you're done. Also, John Evans couldn't be with us today to send us first what our final plan is, or let's say our preliminary plan. Send it to John and ask him to review it, because the city would have to administer it, really. The orders will have to come into the city desk, and the checks would have to come into the city desk, which is great, and it's not that much work, but they have to agree to do it.
Yeah. Well, let me go back. Two of the three of us think the residents ought to pay for the planning, or pay for half. Okay. Well, that's the majority. So that I think would be the plan. Okay.
What's the plan again?
The plan is the residents are either going to pay for the planning or pay for half.
Yes.
The majority rules. Okay. Yeah. We'll see how it works. If it sits on the shelf, if there's not much interest, then we'll come back. We'll see how the people.
I bet you there'll be interest.
I hope so. Yeah. So okay. So that's our part of the plan. What I think would like to do is to contact, and I or one of us, to contact Anchorage and get their documentation.
I have their documentation.
Great. Could you get copies that we could look at? So
I can send out a copy of their order form that they used, and the agreement that they asked residents to initial different, things like that I mentioned before. But I think, my opinion would be, again, on the trying to get it off to a good start, keeping it relatively simple. I would encourage you to go planting in the front yards first. And because that is going to be, you're going to be more likely to get a more reasonable planting price for trees that contractors know, for the most part, they can park their trees along the front, the street in front of a house. They don't have issues with, there's some awfully big properties, as you know, in Prospect, of trying to find where a location might be in the backyard. It's probably going to cost more money to do that. Just initially, I think you'll have less headaches. Try the front yard for a couple years. If that works well and you can expand it. Now I know Anchorage, for the last few years, everything is along the front yards, because we want to, it depends on what your focus is, but we wanted to have canopy trees that canopy over the streets, where we've lost lots of trees in the front yards, kind of like on Westover Drive in the estates of Hunting Creek, or even on your street, Herb.
Yeah.
But they have offered, I'm just throwing these ideas out. You certainly don't have to do this. And I can't remember how they got by with this. I'll have to ask again. But they have in recent years, I think, I know what they did. They've been offering one flowering tree. They've been offering all shade trees that plant in the front yard, but along the streets. But they've been offering one shade tree, ornamental tree, a flowering tree, like a dogwood or a redbud or something like that. And I think, I'll have to check on that, but I'm thinking they could be planted at another location, like up on a corner of a house or somewhere else other than it was an exception to the planting parameters I've described. And I think that those trees, the resident, I'll have to check, but I think that single flowering tree, the residents paid the whole cost in that case, because it was on private property.
Okay, or another way we can have would be to have the Arbor Fest giveaways even more flowering trees. We've had a lot of flowering trees at Arbor Fest.
Right.
And increase the emphasis on the flowering trees at Arbor Fest, and the residents can do whatever they want with them. And then the street trees would be more shade or canopy trees.
Right. That's
Good idea.
That sounds great.
Well, and I like the idea of, let's just concentrate on residential. It definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see how that goes. I mean, to do the commercial I think we'd have to have a really overall plan to actually try to encourage people so they're not just the Lone Ranger, that they're really, so
Right.
we'll deal with that later.
Commercial people before, and offered the trees personally, and the free trees, and
Hey,
nobody showed up.
Lee, remember they weren't going to let us plant in Kelly Park, but Lee, I can go down there and hug those trees. So it's a little more perseverance.
You got to keep an eye on those, Herb. You go by those every day.
I do. I'll even walk down there and hug them. But anyways, yeah, let's just residential. And if we get that from Andrea, can we maybe create some drafts, letters, Lee? So, I mean, I like the other thing Andrea said about where it limits, where the forestry board really in the city is not responsible.
Right.
Take
We're reduce liability. Yes.
Some the city would want to be involved in that.
That would not be part of the order form, that the resident sends in an order for a specific tree, they send in their check, and somewhere on that order form it says, we recognize that the Forest Station Board and the City of Prospect is not responsible for X, Y, and Z, or whatever.
Right. And another point is that they have to understand there's not a warranty on those trees. We're not guaranteeing them for a couple years. This is a less expensive way for them to get really good quality trees than if they paid a landscaper to come in and plant them for them.
Yeah.
So then there's no guarantee. Warranty.
Better, right? We could make it simple. They share half the cost, whatever that is, but it would be something like $150 if it's half the cost.
Yeah. I think that's what we're thinking in terms of. So.
I mean, it depends, there is a little variation in the exact cost of these different trees, depending on the species. Usually oak trees, for instance, cost a little more than a maple. I mean, we're only talking $15, $20 difference, but that's where the order form would come in that maybe you could send out, or the city could send out or whatever. Does the city? Yeah. And you would have those prices, whatever the price is on there that the resident has to pay, whatever price.
We have to get a budget for so much for this price. Why don't we make it, don't get into percentages. I mean, just make it, it's $150 cost for the resident if they want to be in the program. And they have to guarantee they have to maintain the maintenance of it. So the city's.
I'll send out this order form that you can see that I was talking about to give you an idea, and that might spark, more things you want to do on your end,
Yeah, I'm interested in that language though.
Yep. Well, they've had to go through a lot of little issues that have come up over time, so it's become pretty specific.
Well, I think that's exactly what the city will want, something very specific. So
right.
Yeah, I think it's great to base that we've got Anchorage to base our, our,
Program on.
It's been very successful. They probably planted
Yeah.
well over 1,000, probably close to 1,500 trees in the
that
last.
is so exciting that we would do that in Prospect. So
Yeah.
exciting.
Anchorage is what, probably four times as old as Prospect. We're like 47 years old. And I know my dad lived in Anchorage 90 years ago.
Goes back to the early 1800s, late 1700s, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I mean, their forestry program started in probably 88 or 87, 88 range, 1987, 88.
So just for the record, when we started our program, Christy Kramer and I went out and met with the forestry board at that time, and we got a lot of guidance from them.
Oh,
So
great.
really, our program is tied in many ways to theirs. So we're just trying to catch up.
Well,
Okay.
we're
I'm trying to summarize where we are. We agree we're going to have a cost sharing program. We're going to offer trees to residents through a formal offer somehow in the newsletter or whatever they can so they at least know they can order the trees. One positive thought: if we share the cost instead of 10 trees, of $150, we could do double that, 20 trees. That would be $3,000 to the city. And
I would say easily you could do that.
But what do we do if the residents want to buy their own tree?
Well, they can't as part of this program, because they can't buy you don't qualify if you're just an individual resident to get a wholesale tree price from a large wholesale tree nursery. You'd have to buy a quantity. You'd probably have to offer a minimum of 20 trees. Well, I would say a minimum of 20 trees. That's, just to get a wholesale cost and
well,
whatever. I don't know what the city council would go for,
Well, no, let's don't get into that. It's our job to present it. It's their job to approve it or to reject it. So I think 20 trees sounds like 20 trees is a good number, Lee. That's right.
That's great.
yeah, that'd be
serious.
I can on the front. I can send a note to the mayor and Laura Taylor, ask them. We're talking now about the next fiscal year, not this fiscal year.
Okay.
Because this is going to be a full program to increase or add a line item, $3,000 for the carrying costs with the residents. That would still keep, we have $3,000 requested already for planting and tree care in the city-owned property.
Right.
And we also have requested something like $1,500 for ArborFest, and I think we decided we'd try to keep ArborFest. So really, we're asking for another $1,000.
Yeah. That sounds good, Lee. I think.
If you get the plan kind of worked up and send it to John and then to Chris, I'll send a note asking for another $3,000 in next year's budget.
Great.
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other comments?
I think it's a great program, and I really hope, I think it'd be really make a difference. Like you said, it'll start making a huge difference, and
Boy.
these streets look where people don't have any trees. The other thing I've noticed, and I don't know how many parameters if you go forward with this, but another thing is that sometimes people, if what they've done in Anchorage is the resident puts the flag in, bud comes to mark. The flag only gets moved if it's in a bad spot, like if it's right next to a tree stump or, but the other thing is I've noticed in some of these places where they planted trees is sometimes the residents want to plant too many, like maybe they order 2 trees, but they really only need 1. Or maybe, just not plant it. Maybe we put something in there about not planting within like 20 feet of another tree or something.
Yeah.
Just so they don't plant
Yeah.
don't get too crowded.
Mhm.
That's a discussion for down the road. But I'll send you the information I have from Anchorage, and then you can look that over and, go from there.
Great.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I wish we could do it now.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I know it's a long climb up the hill, Connie, to come all the way up to Cali Park. But to give you inspiration, just come up to Cali Park and hug 7 trees.
It already looks better, doesn't it, Herb?
It does.
Yeah.
Where did Connie go? Did she
She's
leave?
here. She's here.
And how about doing a little sketch of the tree?
I'd be happy to. Any painting or drawing you want me to do, I'd love to.
I went out to take some photos but I realized the planners didn't really care for me to be taking photos of them.
Oh, you could have taken photos of them. You just
Well,
you're the boss man.
well, I still was, so I don't, the photos I took are pretty crummy, but it would be great to have, and now, they bloomed out. And so a photo that would go in the next newsletter and a comment about, more shade for Cali Park.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think you should have a little article about it and keep promoting it and sparking interest.
Something like
Connie, can you take that on?
Well, exactly what do you want me to do? Exactly.
Well, it's either a Connie sketch, nice artistic sketch, or a photo, and then just a little blurb about, I actually went to a little neighborhood party Friday night, and I was bragging to everybody about, you got to go. Of course, all these people live in the neighborhood, so we get to see those trees continually, So anyway,
That's good.
That's a good idea, Herb. I'll do it. Yeah.
thank you.
I'll send it in to whom?
It goes, Ron.
Okay.
you need to send it in a finished form, not like an attached document that he can just run in the newsletter. He doesn't like to have to retype or reformat.
Why don't you send it
Just
out
like
to
sort
us to read, Connie, when you get it done?
Send it to whom?
Us. Why don't you send it out to the forestry board, just like Lee does, just to
Oh,
see
okay.
maybe there's, and then
Okay.
just
Yeah.
as a
Good
thought.
idea.
And Connie, were you on when Sarah made a comment about this idea?
I guess not.
Well, she I don't want to put words in her mouth. She can, but she said she thought it was a great idea, this program.
Good.
Good.
I do. I think there are so many neat things that this city could do that, there's so many niche products that we can make that are super attractive to people who want to live in Prospect and stay in Prospect.
Yes.
And what we charge money for, in taxes, like the backdoor trash pickup, super niche, super great idea. This tree program, I think, could be the exact same thing. So I think it's a phenomenal idea, but those little touches that you can go, that is what gives Prospect that neat little vibe that would want to keep people and want people to want to move there, because you get these cool little things from your tax dollars.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, Lee, I think we got our homework to do, but I think we're on to a good opportunity.
Yes, that's right. And thank you for being the chief advocate.
Okay.
Yeah, you are, Herb.
Hey, Connie,
You're the big
Connie,
shaker.
before you get off, a couple of gentlemen I saw earlier today want to know where Cliff is. If you see that, Cliff, will you have him call me?
He's out cutting the grass right now.
Okay.
I'll tell him to call you.
Okay. Thank you. See,
Okay, are we done here?
I think so.
Okay.
was a
can we
great
move to
meeting.
adjourn?
Yep. Thank you. Motion, yes.
Kurt,
Adjourn.
A
Kurt,
second.
Move to adjourn. Okay.
All right,
We're
sounds
adjourned.
good. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ron, for setting the meeting up.
Thank you.